Sloane woke up to a cold hand gripping her wrist and a male voice murmuring, "She's alive, finally," way too close to her ear. She opened her eyes and saw a ceiling that definitely wasn't hers. Dark wood beams, crystal chandelier, the kind of thing that shows up in architecture magazines with titles like high-end minimalism, and there were at least 15 people surrounding the king-size bed where she lay, all in impeccable business attire, staring at her like she was a bomb about to explode. "Mrs. Westfield, what a relief," said a woman in cat-eye glasses, clutching a clipboard like a shield. "We thought Mr. Westfield would have to cancel the meeting with the Japanese investors." Sloane blinked. Westfield? She was Sloane Kincaid, 28 years old, freelance graphic designer, resident of a 400-square-foot apartment in Austin that perpetually smelled like her neighbor's curry. She was definitely not a Mrs. Westfield with a crystal chandelier bedroom. "Sorry, but I think there's been a mistake," she started, then realized she was wearing silk pajamas that cost more than her rent. Like, a really big mistake. "I'm not, darling." The voice cut through the air like a cold blade. Sloane turned her head and finally saw him. The man stood against the opposite wall, arms crossed, wearing a charcoal gray suit that was probably Italian and definitely expensive. Dark brown hair slicked back with military precision, a jaw that looked like it had been carved with a chisel, and steel blue eyes that analyzed her with the coldness of someone calculating falling stock prices. He was, objectively, the most handsome man Sloane had ever seen, and also the most terrifying. "You're confused because of the medication," he continued, walking toward the bed with measured steps. "Dr. Patterson said it was normal." Then he turned to the corporate audience. "Everyone out. Now." They obeyed like well-trained soldiers. Within 15 seconds, the room was empty except for Sloane and the Iceman in human form. "Who the heck are you?" Sloane asked, because honestly, she'd passed the point of pretending to understand anything. "Your husband," he replied with the same intonation he'd used to say accountant or dentist. "At least for now." Sloane laughed. She couldn't help it. It was that kind of nervous laugh that comes out when your brain simply gives up on processing reality. Okay. Is this a prank? Are there hidden cameras? Because I signed a consent form once for a home makeover show and got traumatized, so if this is... You don't remember last night? It wasn't a question. Sloane paused. Last night was blank, completely blank. The last thing she remembered was being at Mockingbird Tavern, the bar she always went to on Fridays after work, celebrating finally finishing that redesigned logo for the annoying organic coffee shop. She'd ordered a Moscow Mule, or 2, maybe 3. After that, nothing. "You drank something you shouldn't have," the man said, still in that clinical voice as if he were reporting market data. "Probably GHB. My driver found you stumbling on 6th Street alone, clearly under the influence. He brought you here because it was safer than a public hospital full of reporters." Sloane felt her stomach turn. GHB, the date rape drug. Someone drugged me? It appears so. He put his hands in his pockets, impassive. "And when you woke up at 3 in the morning, delirious, you screamed at my security team that you were my wife and that I was trying to kidnap you. It was quite convincing. You even knew my full last name. I don't know your last name." Exactly the problem. Silence. Sloane looked at her own hands. No wedding ring, obviously. And then at him. "Why didn't you correct me?" For the first time, something close to an emotion crossed his face. Something quick and dangerous. "Because on the same night, my grandmother decided to make a surprise visit. She's 86 years old with a serious heart condition. For the past 6 months, the only thing keeping her alive is the hope of seeing me married." He paused. "And you showed up at the front door screaming, 'Where's my husband?' wearing a cocktail dress at the exact moment she arrived." Sloane covered her face with her hands. "This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. So your grandmother thinks I'm your wife." "My grandmother, my executive team, and probably half the board of directors by end of day." He sat in the armchair beside the bed, finally taking his hands out of his pockets. "I have a $200 million merger closing next week. I need to appear stable, reliable, married. And you, apparently, need protection from whoever drugged you last night. You're suggesting we fake it? I'm proposing an arrangement." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time Sloane saw something beyond ice in his eyes. something sharp and calculated. 3 weeks. You stay here, pretend to be my wife, show up to 2 or 3 events with me. Return, I put my security team on finding out who attacked you and make sure you're never vulnerable like that again. Plus $50,000 for your time. $50,000. Sloan could pay 2 years of rent, buy new equipment, maybe even hire a lawyer to sue the ex-client who never paid for those designs. But it was also absolutely insane. And if I refuse? He shrugged, an elegant and indifferent movement. You go back to your life. I deal with my grandmother and the press. But whoever drugged you is still out there, and you still don't know if he knows where you live. It was a low blow, and by the cold gleam in his eyes, intentional, Sloan hated that it worked. 3 weeks, she repeated. And then? Then you return to Austin as a much wealthier woman, and I go back to being the workaholic with no personal life that I've always been. He extended his hand, formal as a business handshake. Shall we keep up appearances, Mrs. Westfield? She looked at his hand, tanned, no ring, long, elegant fingers, and thought about all the terrible decisions she'd made in her life. This one, at least, came with a $50,000 check. She shook his hand. 3 weeks. But if you turn out to be a psychopath, I'm breaking that chandelier over your head. His lips curved. It wasn't quite a smile, more like the idea of a smile if ideas could cut glass. Fair enough. I'm Jasper Westfield, by the way, CEO of Westfield Dynamics. And you should know that my grandmother expects us for dinner in 2 hours. 2 hours? Sloan looked at her reflection in the closet's glass door. Disheveled hair, deep circles under her eyes, still wearing stolen silk pajamas. I look like a raccoon that fought a blender. I have a team for that. Jasper was already standing, adjusting his shirt cuffs. And I suggest you rehearse your story. My grandmother is sweet, but she's not an idiot. If she suspects anything, the deal's off. He left the room before Sloan could respond. She sat there, on a stranger billionaire's king-size bed, in a room that was probably worth more than her entire life, officially pretending to be married to the coldest man she'd ever met. And the only thing she could think was, my mom is going to absolutely lose it when she finds out about this. The team Jasper mentioned turned out to be 3 women who descended on Sloan like a SWAT unit with makeup brushes and opinions about her eyebrows. We have 90 minutes, announced the tallest one. A black woman with silver hair styled in a perfect bob. Her name was Claudette, and she had the energy of someone who'd styled presidents. Mr. Westfield wants natural elegance. His grandmother hates anything too trendy. Does his grandmother also hate free will? Sloan muttered as Claudette steered her toward the bathroom. Because that seems to be the theme here. The other 2 women, a petite redhead named Bex and a muscular blonde named Sutton, who looked like she could bench press a car, exchanged glances that Sloan couldn't quite read. Mr. Westfield pays very well for discretion, Claudette said carefully, gesturing for Sloan to sit on a velvet stool in front of a mirror that was, naturally, framed in actual gold. Whatever arrangement you 2 have is none of our business. The arrangement where I woke up in his house with no memory of how I got here. All 3 women went very still. Bex recovered first. He told us you were drugged, at a bar downtown. Her voice had gone soft, almost gentle. Are you okay? Do you need us to call someone? The genuine concern in her voice made Sloane's throat tight. She'd been operating on adrenaline and confusion for the past hour, but hearing actual human empathy made everything feel suddenly, terrifyingly real. I'm okay, she managed. He said his security team is looking into it, and honestly, staying here for a few weeks while they figure out who did it seems safer than going back to my apartment alone. Sutton nodded slowly. Mr. Westfield's head of security is the best. If anyone can find the creep, it's Ramos. Plus, Bex added, already opening what looked like a professional makeup kit, $50,000 is nothing to sneeze at. Sloane's head snapped up. How did you... Standard rate for contracted companionship in high-profile situations, Claudette said matter-of-factly, running a critical eye over Sloane's hair. Mr. Westfield used the same arrangement 2 years ago for the Investors' Gala. Though that woman was a professional actress, you're a graphic designer who apparently can't hold her liquor. Bex laughed, and some of the tension in the room broke. Well, you're about to become Mrs. Jasper Westfield for the next 3 weeks. Let's make sure you look the part. The transformation took exactly 87 minutes. Sloane barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her black hair, usually thrown up in a messy bun, now fell in sleek waves past her shoulders. The makeup was subtle but transformative. Her dark eyes looked bigger, her cheekbones sharper, her lips fuller. And the dress. The dress was a deep emerald green that somehow made her skin glow. It hit just below the knee, fitted but not tight, with a neckline that was elegant rather than revealing. She looked like someone who belonged in a penthouse, someone who could believably be married to a CEO. "One more thing," Claudette said, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a wedding ring set that probably cost more than Sloane's car. The engagement ring featured a flawless diamond that caught the light like a tiny disco ball, surrounded by smaller emeralds. The wedding band was a delicate twist of white and rose gold. "These are loaners from the family collection," Claudette explained, sliding them onto Sloane's left hand. "Mrs. Westfield Sr., that's the grandmother, will notice immediately if you're not wearing proper rings." The weight of them felt foreign and heavy. "Does she know?" Sloane asked quietly. "That this is fake?" All three women looked at each other again, and this time Sloane caught the meaning. "Absolutely not. Mrs. Westfield Sr. has been asking about Jasper's love life for 6 years," Sutton said. "Ever since his father died and he took over the company. She thinks he's lonely." "Is he?" Bex shrugged. "He works 18-hour days, never dates, and once told off a supermodel at a charity auction for being inefficient with her auction paddle technique. You tell me." "Despite everything," Sloane snorted. A sharp knock on the door made them all jump. 5 minutes, Jasper's voice called from the hallway. "The car is waiting." Claudette gave Sloane a final once-over, adjusted a strand of hair, and nodded. "You'll do. Just remember, you're madly in love with him. Mrs. Westfield is old-fashioned. She'll want to see affection." "Affection." "Right. From the man who proposed a business arrangement like he was negotiating a corporate merger." "Well," Bex said with a grin, "you did accept. So technically you're just as weird as he is." Sloane couldn't argue with that. She found Jasper waiting in the hallway, and her breath actually caught. He'd changed into a navy suit that fit him like it had been grown on his body, paired with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. His hair was slightly less severe now, and he'd shaved. He looked human, almost. His eyes traveled over her appearance with the same clinical assessment he'd used earlier. But something flickered in his expression. Gone in a second. "But there. You clean up well," he said finally. "You too. Very emotionally unavailable billionaire chic." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "My grandmother's estate is a 30-minute drive. We should establish basic facts before we arrive." "Facts like what? My favorite color? Your secret love of boy bands?" "Facts like how we met when we got married and why we kept it secret." He started walking toward the elevator, clearly expecting her to follow. Which she did, because the alternative was standing alone in a hallway wearing borrowed jewelry, worth more than her annual income. The elevator was the kind with mirrors on all sides, which meant Sloane could see herself from every angle looking like an imposter in a very expensive costume. "We met 6 months ago," Jasper said, staring straight ahead as the elevator descended. "At a gallery opening in downtown Austin. You were there for work, designing promotional materials for the artist. I was there because my assistant insists I maintain a cultural presence for PR purposes." "Romantic." "We argued about whether modern art is actually art or just expensive nonsense. You won the argument. I was impressed." "Was this before or after you proposed a fake marriage to a stranger?" He ignored that. "We started seeing each other quietly. I proposed 3 months ago. We got married at a courthouse 2 weeks ago because we both hate big weddings." "Do I hate big weddings? Because I feel like that's something I should have a say in for my fake life. You hate weddings because you're practical and hate being the center of attention." He finally turned to look at her, and his expression was unreadable, which, based on your reaction to having 3 stylists descend on you, might actually be true. The elevator doors opened into an underground garage that looked like something out of a spy movie. Sleek, spotless, filled with cars that Sloane couldn't afford to breathe near. Jasper led her to a black Mercedes that was probably worth 6 figures. A driver in a neat gray suit stood beside it, holding the door open. "Ma'am," he said with a slight nod. Sloane slid into the back seat and Jasper followed. The door closed with the kind of solid thunk that only very expensive cars make. The moment they were alone, Jasper pulled out his phone. "One more thing," he said, not looking up from the screen. "My grandmother is going to ask about children. She always does." "Children? Tell her we're waiting a year or two. She'll accept that. She's old-fashioned, but she's not unreasonable." Sloane stared at him. "You've really thought this through. I run a multi-billion-dollar company. Thinking things through is literally my job. And do you ever think about, I don't know, feelings, emotions? The fact that you're lying to your dying grandmother?" That got his attention. He looked up from his phone, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something raw in his expression. "Every single day," he said quietly. "But the lie is keeping her alive right now. And in 3 weeks, when the merger closes and she's satisfied that I'm settled, I'll tell her the truth. That you and I didn't work out. That we tried. She'll be disappointed, but she'll accept it. And what if she has a heart attack from the disappointment? Then at least she'll die knowing I tried to be happy, which is more than I can give her with the truth." The silence in the car was heavy. Sloane looked out the window as Austin's skyline blurred past. 6th Street, where someone had drugged her last night. The coffee shop where she worked late nights on freelance projects. Her whole life small and ordinary, while she sat in the back of a luxury car wearing someone else's jewelry, about to lie to a dying woman. "This is insane," she said finally. "Yes. Completely, utterly insane. Also yes. And I'm doing it anyway." Jasper's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed something quickly, then looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was seeing past the dress and makeup to the person underneath. "For what it's worth," he said, "I am sorry about last night. About what happened to you. No one should go through that." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. "Thanks," she said. Then, because the moment was getting too heavy, "So, husband, tell me about your secret love of boy bands." He actually smiled. Small, but real. "I don't have one, but I did go through a reggae phase in college that my board of directors can never know about." "Reggae? You? People contain multitudes, Sloane." It was the first time he'd used her actual name, not Darling or Mrs. Westfield. Somehow, that made everything feel slightly less fake. The car turned onto a tree-lined driveway that seemed to stretch for miles. At the end of it, lit up like something from a fairy tale, was a mansion that made Jasper's penthouse look modest. "That's your grandmother's house?" Sloane breathed. "Estate, and yes." Jasper straightened his tie, his expression sliding back into that cool, controlled mask. "Ready to meet your new family?" Sloane looked down at the rings on her finger, sparkling in the car's interior lights. "Not even a little bit." "Perfect, neither am I." He opened the car door. "Let's go be madly in love." The woman who opened the door was not what Sloane expected. Mrs. Westfield Sr. was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall in her sensible heels, with silver hair twisted into an elegant chignon, and eyes so sharp they could probably appraise your net worth in 3 seconds flat. She wore a lavender cardigan over a cream dress, pearl earrings, and an expression that suggested she'd seen through every lie ever told in her presence. "Jasper," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone supposedly on the edge of death. "You're 12 minutes late." "Traffic on Mopac was terrible," Jasper replied smoothly, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "Grandmother, this is your wife, obviously." Mrs. Westfield's gaze fixed on Sloane with the intensity of a laser pointer. "The one you married in secret like some kind of spy movie character." Sloane's stomach dropped. She knows. She absolutely knows. But Jasper didn't even blink. "We wanted to keep things private. You know how the media can be. I know how you can be. Secretive, controlling, treating your personal life like a classified Pentagon document." The older woman's expression softened slightly as she turned back to Sloane. "Come here, child. Let me look at you properly." Sloane stepped forward, very aware of Jasper's hand suddenly on the small of her back. The touch was light but possessive, exactly what a real husband might do. Mrs. Westfield studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Sloane resisted the urge to fidget with the rings on her finger. "You have good bone structure," Mrs. Westfield announced finally, "and you're not wearing too much makeup, which shows restraint. I approve. Come inside before the roast dries out completely." She turned and walked into the house, leaving Sloane and Jasper standing in the doorway. "That went well," Jasper murmured. "She called you a spy movie character." She's called me worse. The interior of the house was somehow even more intimidating than the exterior. High ceilings, oil paintings that were probably worth small countries, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was cream and gold and perfectly arranged, the kind of place where you were afraid to breathe too loudly. "The dining room is this way," Mrs. Westfield called from somewhere deeper in the house. "And Jasper, that navy suit makes you look like an undertaker. Tomorrow you wear the gray." Sloane bit back a laugh. Jasper's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She's always like this," he said under his breath as they followed the sound of her voice. "Opinionated about everything. I like her. You haven't eaten her cooking yet." The dining room featured a table that could seat 20 but was only set for 3, all clustered at one end like survivors of a shipwreck. Crystal glasses, actual silverware, and more forks than Sloane knew what to do with. "Sit, Mrs. Westfield commanded, gesturing to the seats. "Jasper, you're at the head, obviously. Sloane, I can call you Sloane, can't I? You're here beside him where I can interrogate you properly." "I prefer interview," Sloane said, sitting down carefully in a chair that probably cost more than her laptop. "Interrogation sounds so aggressive." Mrs. Westfield's eyes gleamed. "I like you already. Most of Jasper's previous girlfriends were terrified of me. I'm not most girlfriends. No, you're his wife. Which brings me to my first question. Why did you marry my grandson in a courthouse like you were on the run from the law?" Sloane opened her mouth, but Jasper beat her to it. "We both hate spectacle," he said calmly, pouring water into Sloane's glass before his own. "And given the media attention around the company merger, we wanted something private. Just us." "How romantic," Mrs. Westfield said, in a tone that suggested she found it about as romantic as a tax return. "And your family was fine with this, Sloane? No mother demanding a big wedding?" This was dangerous territory. Sloane's real mother lived in Portland and taught yoga. They talked twice a month and had a good relationship, but not the kind where Sloane could explain a fake marriage to a billionaire. "My parents are unconventional," Sloane said carefully. "They supported whatever made me happy." "Unconventional how?" "My mom's a yoga instructor who once lived in an ashram for 2 years. My dad builds custom motorcycles and has a tattoo of a dragon that covers his entire back. They met at Burning Man." Mrs. Westfield blinked. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "Well, that certainly explains why you're not intimidated by old money." She picked up a small bell and rang it. "At least you'll bring some life into this family. We've been boring for 3 generations." A staff member appeared with the first course, some kind of soup that smelled like herbs and butter. Sloane picked up what she hoped was the right spoon. "So," Mrs. Westfield continued, because apparently she didn't believe in eating peacefully, "tell me how you two met. And I want the real story, not whatever sanitized version Jasper prepared in the car." Sloane nearly choked on her soup. Beside her, Jasper went very still. "The real story?" Sloane repeated. "I'm 86 years old with a heart condition. I can tell when people are feeding me corporate-approved nonsense." Mrs. Westfield leaned forward, eyes sharp. "How did you really meet?" Sloane looked at Jasper. He looked back at her. Some unspoken communication passed between them, and Sloane made a split-second decision to gamble. "He rear-ended my car," she said. Jasper's water glass paused halfway to his mouth. "I was stopped at a red light on Congress Avenue," Sloane continued, warming to the lie. "And this expensive black Mercedes just wham, right into my bumper. I got out ready to absolutely tear into whoever was driving, and there he was, in a suit that cost more than my car, looking annoyed that I had somehow inconvenienced him." Mrs. Westfield was grinning now. "Go on." "I told him he drove like someone who'd bought their license on eBay. He told me my car was a traffic hazard because it was bright yellow. We argued for 10 minutes in the middle of traffic until a cop showed up and threatened to ticket us both." "And then?" Mrs. Westfield looked delighted. Sloane glanced at Jasper, who was staring at her with something between horror and admiration. "Then he offered to buy me dinner to make up for the accident. I said no. He insisted. I said no again. He asked why I was being difficult." Sloane smiled. "I told him I wasn't being difficult. I was being expensive. If he wanted to make it up to me, he could buy me dinner at Uchi." "The sushi place?" Mrs. Westfield's eyebrows rose. "That's a $200 meal." "I know. I figured he'd say no and I'd never see him again." Sloane turned to look at Jasper, who was watching her with those unreadable steel blue eyes. "But he didn't say no. I said yes, Jasper said quietly. Made a reservation for that same night. She showed up 20 minutes late wearing paint-stained jeans. They were my favorite jeans. They had a hole in the knee the size of my fist. It was a fashion statement. Mrs. Westfield was laughing so hard she had to dab at her eyes with her napkin. This is the best thing I've heard in years. Jasper, you paid $200 for sushi with a woman in ripped jeans? $300, Jasper corrected. She ordered sake. Expensive sake, Sloane added, getting into the story now. The kind that comes in a little wooden box. I like her, Mrs. Westfield declared, pointing her soup spoon at Sloane. She's got spine. All those other girls you dated were so boring. Remember that blonde who worked in marketing? What was her name? I don't remember. Exactly, forgettable. Mrs. Westfield turned back to Sloane. So, after this overpriced sushi date, then what? Then he ghosted me for 2 weeks. Jasper's fork clattered against his plate. I did not ghost you. I was in Singapore for a business acquisition. You didn't text. That's ghosting. I was in 12-hour meetings every day. They have phones in Singapore, Jasper. Mrs. Westfield looked like she was watching the best show on television. And you took him back after that? Only because he sent me a ridiculously extravagant apology gift. Sloane was completely making this up now, but it felt more real than the boring gallery story Jasper had prepared. Flowers, chocolate, and a new bumper for my car. Professional installation included. That does sound like something Jasper would do, Mrs. Westfield admitted. Throw money at a problem until it goes away. I'm sitting right here, Jasper said dryly. We know, dear, that's what makes this so entertaining. Mrs. Westfield rang her bell again, and the soup bowls were whisked away, replaced by plates of roasted chicken that looked like it belonged in a cooking magazine. So, after the bumper, you forgave him? After the bumper, we started actually dating. Coffee dates, gallery openings, long walks where he complained about quarterly reports, and I complained about difficult clients. Sloane picked up her wine glass, surprised to find her hand was steady. He grew on me, like a very handsome, very expensive fungus. Jasper made a sound that might have been a laugh, or a cough, hard to tell. A fungus, Mrs. Westfield repeated, delighted. Oh, I like you very much. Jasper, you married up. I'm aware, Jasper said, and there was something in his voice that made Sloane look at him sharply. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. Possibly both. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of questions and stories, most of which Sloane had to invent on the spot. She talked about her graphic design work, real, her tiny apartment that smelled like curry, real, and how Jasper had proposed on a rooftop under the stars. Completely fake, but it made Mrs. Westfield sigh happily. By the time dessert arrived, some kind of elaborate chocolate thing with gold leaf, Sloane's face hurt from smiling, and her brain hurt from keeping track of all the lies. One last question, Mrs. Westfield said, setting down her dessert fork and fixing Sloane with that laser-sharp gaze. Do you love him? The room went very quiet. Sloane felt Jasper tense beside her. This was the question that mattered, the one that could unravel everything. She looked at Jasper, really looked at him. The severe haircut, the expensive suit, the controlled expression that never quite reached his eyes. The man who'd offered her $50,000 to fake a marriage. The man who was lying to his dying grandmother to keep her alive just a little bit longer. Yes, Sloane heard herself say. I love him. And the scary part was, when she said it, it almost felt true. Mrs. Westfield studied them both for a long moment. Then she smiled, warm and genuine. Good. Because he needs someone who can make him laugh. Someone who isn't afraid to call him expensive fungus. She stood up, suddenly looking her 86 years. Now, I'm tired. You two stay and finish your wine. Jasper, walk me to my room. Jasper stood immediately, ever the dutiful grandson. As he helped Mrs. Westfield toward the door, she paused and looked back at Sloane. Welcome to the family, dear. Don't let him work too hard. I'll do my best. The moment they disappeared into the hallway, Sloane slumped in her chair and drained the rest of her wine in one long gulp. She'd just survived dinner with a woman who could probably smell lies from 3 counties away. She'd invented an entire fake relationship history involving car accidents and sushi and rooftop proposals. And she'd told a dying woman she loved her grandson, a grandson she'd met exactly 4 hours ago. Sloane was refilling her wine glass, because she'd earned it, when Jasper returned. He closed the dining room door and leaned against it, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "Rear-ended your car?" he said finally. "It was better than your boring gallery story." She believed it. She believed us. Sloane took a sip of wine. "That thing where you poured my water first? Nice touch. That thing where you called me an expensive fungus? Bold choice." It made her laugh. It made her love you. Jasper moved to the table, picked up his own wine glass, and raised it slightly. "You're a better actor than the professional I hired 2 years ago." "I'm a better liar, you mean." Semantics. They stood there in the ornate dining room, surrounded by crystal and silver and the weight of all their lies, and something shifted between them. Some acknowledgement that they were in this together now, for better or worse. "She asked if I loved you," Sloane said quietly. "I heard." I said yes. "I heard that too." Sloane set down her wine glass. "Does that bother you? That I lied to your dying grandmother about loving you?" Jasper was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been lying to her about being happy for 6 years. At least your lie made her smile." There was something raw in his voice, something that made Sloane see past the expensive suit and the cold eyes to the person underneath. Someone who was just as tired as she was, just as lonely. "Come on," she said, suddenly unable to handle the heaviness of the moment. "Let's go home before I start believing my own lies." Jasper's lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. "Too late," he said. "I think I already do." Sloane woke up to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and, for the second day in a row, absolutely no idea where she was. Then it all came rushing back. The fake marriage, the dinner, the lies, the moment she'd told a dying woman she loved her grandson. She sat up and realized she was alone in the massive bed, still wearing the emerald dress from last night. Someone, presumably the mysterious team, had left a silk robe draped over the chair and a glass of water on the nightstand with 2 aspirin beside it. The clock on the wall said 9:47 a.m. Sloane never slept past 7, ever. She padded to the bathroom, which was roughly the size of her entire apartment, and found her reflection looking surprisingly not terrible, considering she'd slept in full makeup. Someone had left an entire arsenal of skincare products on the marble counter, along with a note in neat handwriting. "These are yours now, Claudette." 20 minutes later, showered and wearing the softest robe she'd ever touched, Sloane ventured out of the bedroom to find whatever this new bizarre life held. The penthouse in daylight was even more intimidating than at night. Everything was clean lines and expensive materials. Marble, glass, dark wood. Art on the walls that was probably worth more than she'd make in her lifetime. The kind of place where you were afraid to touch anything. She found Jasper in what appeared to be a home office, sitting behind a desk made of glass and steel, typing on a laptop with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. He'd changed into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a CEO and more like a model in a very expensive catalog. His hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. "Good morning," Sloane said from the doorway. He looked up, and something flickered in his expression. "It's almost 10. Was beginning to think you'd died. I don't sleep past 7 normally. Your bed is apparently made of clouds and lies. The lies help with the comfort." He closed his laptop. "There's coffee in the kitchen, and breakfast if you're hungry. My chef makes excellent omelets." "You have a chef." "I have a chef, a driver, a housekeeper, 3 security guards, and apparently now a wife." He stood up, stretching slightly. "Would you like the tour?" The penthouse was ridiculous. 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a restaurant, a gym with equipment Sloane didn't know the names of, and a terrace with a view of Austin that made her heart physically ache with its beauty. "This is where I come when the office feels like it's suffocating me," Jasper said, standing beside her at the terrace railing. The morning air was cool, the city spread out below them like a toy model, which is most days. "Must be nice to have a suffocation prevention terrace." "It's practical. Everything with you is practical, isn't it?" He turned to look at her, and there was something different in his expression today. Less guarded. "Not everything. Last night I watched you invent an entire relationship history involving a car accident, an expensive sushi, and I went along with it. That wasn't practical. That was improvisation." "You say that like it's a dirty word." In my line of work, improvisation usually means something's gone terribly wrong. But he was almost smiling when he said it. Though I'll admit, your version was better than mine. She loved the fungus comment. Everyone loves a good fungus comment. They stood there in comfortable silence for a moment, and Sloane realized this was the first time she'd felt remotely relaxed since waking up in this bizarre situation. Something about the morning light and the cool air and the fact that Jasper looked almost human in casual clothes. "So," she said finally, "what happens now? Do I just live here? Pretend to be your wife for 3 weeks?" Essentially. Jasper pulled out his phone, because of course he did, and scrolled through something. "I have a charity gala tomorrow night. Black tie. You'll need to come with me." "Tomorrow? Don't you think we should practice being married first? We survived dinner with my grandmother. A gala will be easy in comparison. Your grandmother is terrifying but kind. A room full of rich people judging me sounds like my personal nightmare. They won't judge you. They'll be too busy judging each other." He pocketed his phone and looked at her seriously. "But you're right. We should establish some protocols." "Protocols? Are we married or forming a military alliance? With my family, those are the same thing." Jasper gestured back toward the living room. "Come on. We need to talk logistics." They settled on opposite ends of a couch that probably cost more than a year of Sloane's rent. Jasper pulled out a tablet and started typing notes like they were in a business meeting. "First, sleeping arrangements," he said. "You noticed we shared a bed last night." Sloane felt her cheeks heat. "I did notice that, yes. My grandmother may visit unannounced. She's done it before. If she sees separate bedrooms, she'll know something's wrong." He glanced up from the tablet. "The bed is large enough that we can maintain appropriate distance." Appropriate distance, right, very romantic. "This isn't about romance, it's about believability." Famous last words, Sloane muttered. Jasper either didn't hear her or chose to ignore it. "Second, public affection. At events I'll need to touch you. Nothing inappropriate. Hand on your back, arm around your waist, that sort of thing. Are you comfortable with that?" Sloane thought about his hand on her back last night at his grandmother's house. How natural it had felt. How her body had responded to even that simple touch. "I can handle it," she said, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "Good. Third, your cover story needs to be consistent. You're a graphic designer, freelance, currently taking a break from client work to focus on the marriage." He was typing as he talked. "You met me 6 months ago via car accident. We dated for 3 months. Got married 2 weeks ago. Your parents live in Portland." "Do they actually?" "Yes, but I'm not telling them about this." "Agreed. The fewer people who know the truth, the better." He set down the tablet and looked at her. "Fourth, and most important, my head of security, Marcus Ramos, is investigating what happened to you Friday night. He'll need to ask you some questions. The reminder of why she was here, not just for the money, but because someone had drugged her, made Sloane's stomach turn. "When?" she asked quietly. "This afternoon, if you're up for it. He's discreet and very good at his job. If there's security footage from the bar, he'll find it. If someone used a credit card to buy you drinks, he'll trace it. And if he doesn't find anything, then you stay here, where you're safe, until we're sure whoever did it isn't a threat." Jasper's expression was serious. "I meant what I said yesterday. No one should go through what you went through, and I have the resources to make sure it doesn't happen again." There was something almost protective in his voice. It surprised her. "Thank you," Sloane said. "I know this whole arrangement is weird and fake, but thank you for that part, for keeping me safe. It's the least I can do considering I'm exploiting your traumatic situation for my own benefit." "Wow, when you put it that way, you sound like a real villain. I've been called worse." He stood up, tablet in hand. "I have conference calls for the rest of the morning. Make yourself at home. The kitchen is fully stocked. There's a library on the 2nd floor if you like to read. And if you need anything, let me guess. There's a team for that?" "There's always a team." He paused at the office door. "Sloane?" "Yeah?" "The car accident story, the expensive sushi, the fungus comment." His lips curved into something that was almost a real smile. "You're better at this than you think." He disappeared into his office before she could respond. Sloane sat there on the expensive couch in the expensive penthouse, wearing a borrowed robe, with fake wedding rings on her finger, and a fake husband who was better at giving compliments than he probably realized. 3 weeks. She could do this for 3 weeks. Probably. The library turned out to be Sloane's favorite room in the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a rolling ladder like in old movies, leather chairs that looked like you could sink into them and never leave. And the books, actual books, not just decorative spines. Someone had read these. Someone had dog-eared pages and cracked spines and made notes in margins. She pulled down a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice and found Jasper's name written inside the front cover in teenage handwriting. Below it, a note. Because you said Elizabeth Bennet was inefficient with her communication strategy. You're an idiot. Mom. Sloane was still smiling at that when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus Ramos, head of security for Mr. Westfield. Would 2 p.m. work for our conversation? No pressure if you need more time. She stared at the message. 2 p.m. meant talking about Friday night. Meant remembering what little she could remember and trying to piece together how someone had slipped something into her drink. But it also meant answers. Maybe. She texted back. 2 p.m. works. Where? I'll come to the penthouse, Mr. Westfield's office, and Ms. Kincaid. We're going to find whoever did this. The certainty in his message made something tight in her chest loosen slightly. At 1:45, Sloane changed into jeans and a sweater that Claudette's team had apparently added to the closet overnight. Everything fit perfectly, which was either impressive or creepy. She hadn't decided which. She found Jasper in his office again, but this time he wasn't alone. A man in his 40s with gray threaded hair and the build of someone who'd spent time in the military stood by the window, holding a tablet. Ms. Kincaid, he said, turning when she entered. I'm Marcus Ramos. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me. His voice was gentle despite his intimidating appearance. Kind eyes. The kind of person who probably dealt with traumatized people regularly. Just Sloane is fine, she said, taking the seat Jasper gestured to. And honestly, I'm not sure how much help I'll be. I don't remember much. That's normal with GHB. The drug causes short-term amnesia. Marcus sat across from her, tablet ready. Let's start with what you do remember. You were at Mockingbird Tavern Friday night? Yeah, I go there most Fridays after work. It's close to my apartment and the bartender knows my usual order. Which is? Moscow Mule. Vodka, ginger beer, lime. Marcus made a note. Were you alone? Yes. I'd finished a big project and wanted to celebrate. My friends were all busy. Do you remember anyone approaching you? Buying you drinks? Talking to you? Sloane closed her eyes, trying to pull up the memories through the fog. There was a guy at the bar. Mid-30s maybe. Brown hair. He was friendly. Asked what I was celebrating. Bought me a drink when I finished my first one. Did he tell you his name? If he did, I don't remember. She opened her eyes, frustrated. I remember thinking he was harmless. Just a guy being nice and then nothing. It's just blank. The next thing I remember is waking up here with Jasper's entire staff staring at me. Marcus nodded, like he'd expected this. Mr. Westfield's driver found you at approximately 11:30 p.m. on 6th Street, 3 blocks from the bar. You were disoriented and unable to give a coherent address. He brought you here because it was safer than leaving you with strangers or taking you to a public hospital. Did anyone else see me? Between the bar and 6th Street? That's what I'm working to find out. I've already requested security footage from Mockingbird Tavern and the surrounding businesses. I've also spoken with the bartender on duty Friday night. He remembers you but doesn't remember seeing anyone suspicious. So we have nothing. We have your testimony, which is more than you think. Physical description of the suspect, approximate timeline, your pattern of behavior at the bar. Marcus's voice was steady, confident. I've worked cases like this before. We'll find him. Jasper, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. How long until we have footage? Bar manager said he'll have it to me by tonight. I'll review it and follow up on any leads. Marcus looked at Sloane. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying here rather than at your apartment. We don't know if this person followed you, knows where you live, or if this was random. You think he might come after me again? I think we should assume the worst until we know otherwise. Marcus's expression was serious. Mr. Westfield's security here is extensive. You're safe in this building. Safe. It was a word Sloane hadn't felt in days. After Marcus left, Sloane sat in Jasper's office, staring at her hands. The rings caught the afternoon light, sparkling like they knew they were fake. You okay? Jasper asked quietly. someone drugged me, put something in my drink while I was celebrating finishing a logo design, and I didn't even notice. Her voice cracked slightly. How did I not notice? Because you trusted that people are generally decent. That's not a flaw. It feels like one right now. Jasper was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He moved from his desk chair to sit beside her on the small couch in his office. 5 years ago, he said, someone embezzled $2 million from my company. It was my CFO, someone I'd known since college, someone I trusted completely. He stared at his hands. I didn't notice for 8 months, and when I finally figured it out, I felt like an idiot, like I should have known. What happened to him? Prison. But that didn't make me feel less stupid. Jasper looked at her. My point is, trusting people isn't weakness, and when that trust is violated, it's not your fault. It's theirs. Sloane felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She was not going to cry in front of this man who probably thought emotions were inefficient. Thank you, she managed. For what? For, she gestured vaguely. This. All of it. You could have just sent me home that night. Let me deal with this alone. I could have, Jasper agreed. But then I would have lost my fake wife and my grandmother would have been devastated. So really, I'm being selfish. He said it so deadpan that it took Sloane a second to realize he was joking. When she did, she laughed, really laughed, for the first time since Friday night. You're terrible at comfort, she said. I'm aware. My emotional intelligence has been described as robotically inadequate. Who described it that way? My last girlfriend. Right before she left me for a yoga instructor named Canyon. Canyon? That's not a real name. That's what I said. She threw a meditation cushion at my head. Sloane laughed again, and some of the tightness in her chest loosened. I'm starting to see why your grandmother thinks you need someone. Because I drive away women with my stunning personality? Because you make jokes when people are sad. It's actually kind of nice. Jasper looked surprised by that. Nice? Don't let it go to your head. Too late, I'm already adding it to my resume. Jasper Westfield, CEO, billionaire, occasionally nice. They sat there in his office, close but not touching, and Sloane realized something slightly terrifying. She was starting to like him. Not fake marriage like him, actually like him, which was a problem because in 3 weeks this would all be over. So, she said, trying to redirect her thoughts somewhere safer, this charity gala tomorrow. What exactly am I walking into? Jasper groaned. Picture a room full of people wearing clothes that cost more than cars, drinking champagne they don't taste, and pretending to care about whatever cause is trendy this month. Sounds delightful. It's torture, but it's expected. He stood up, back to business mode. Claudette will handle your dress. I'll handle the logistics, and we'll survive 3 hours of small talk before we can leave. And then we come home, you make fun of everyone we met, and I'll pretend I don't find it hilarious. He paused at the door to his office. Sound like a plan? Sloane looked at him, this complicated, guarded man who made jokes about emotional intelligence while simultaneously being kind without realizing it. Who was lying to his grandmother to keep her alive? Who was keeping Sloane safe while pretending it was purely transactional? Sounds like a plan, she agreed. But in her head, she was thinking, 3 weeks isn't going to be enough time to figure you out, Jasper Westfield. And that was a problem. Sloane had never worn a dress that cost $15,000 before. She knew it cost $15,000 because Claudette had casually mentioned it while zipping up the back, as if that was a normal amount of money to spend on something you'd wear once. The dress was midnight blue, almost black, with a neckline that was elegant rather than revealing, and a slit up one leg that made Sloane feel like a spy in a movie. You look like you're about to murder someone in a very expensive way, Beck said, adding the final touches to Sloane's makeup. I mean that as a compliment. I feel like I'm about to throw up in a very expensive way. That's normal. First high society event is always terrifying. Sutton handed Sloane a small clutch that probably also cost more than Sloane's car. Just remember, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. That's what you say about bears. Rich people bears, same energy. Sloane laughed despite her nerves. Over the past 2 days, she'd gotten used to the team's presence. They were efficient and professional, but also surprisingly funny. It made the whole situation feel slightly less surreal. Mr. Westfield is waiting, Claudette announced, checking her watch. And you look perfect. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Sloane found Jasper in the living room and her breath literally caught in her throat. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been painted on. His hair was perfect. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and he looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled, "Billionaires Who Could Ruin Your Life." "You clean up nice," she managed. "You look—" He paused and something flickered in his eyes. "Dangerous. Your team said the same thing. Is that the vibe we're going for? At these events?" "Absolutely." He offered his arm. "Ready to face the sharks?" "Not even a little bit." "Perfect. Neither am I." The gala was held at the Four Seasons in a ballroom that looked like someone had melted down a jewelry store and turned it into a room. Crystal chandeliers, gold accents everywhere, and people who sparkled almost as much as the decor. "Stick close to me," Jasper murmured as they entered. "Don't leave my side unless you absolutely have to. And if anyone asks invasive questions about our relationship, just smile mysteriously." Smile mysteriously. "Got it. That's definitely something I can do naturally." "You'll be fine. Just pretend you're designing a logo for the most annoying client imaginable. So, pretend this is a normal Tuesday?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. They hadn't taken 3 steps into the room before people descended on them like very well-dressed vultures. "Jasper, we heard the news!" A woman in a red dress that looked like it cost more than Sloane's annual income air-kissed Jasper's cheeks. "Married! And you kept it secret. How deliciously scandalous!" "Vanessa, this is my wife, Sloane." Jasper's hand settled on the small of Sloane's back, warm and possessive. "Sloane, this is Vanessa Chen. She runs the Chen Foundation." "The wife?" Vanessa turned her assessing gaze on Sloane. "We've been dying to meet you. How did you manage to trap the most eligible bachelor in Austin?" Trap. Like Sloane was some kind of hunter and Jasper was prey. "I rear-ended his car," Sloane said sweetly, "then charged him $200 for sushi. He was hooked." Vanessa blinked, then laughed. "I like her, Jasper. She's got bite." "I'm aware," Jasper said dryly. They spent the next hour being introduced to what felt like hundreds of people whose names Sloane immediately forgot. Everyone wanted to know about the wedding, the relationship, why they'd kept it secret. Jasper handled it smoothly, giving just enough information to satisfy curiosity without revealing anything real. And Sloane played her part, smiled mysteriously, laughed at appropriate moments, let Jasper's hand rest on her waist or her shoulder, each touch sending little sparks of awareness through her that she tried very hard to ignore. "You're doing great," Jasper murmured during a rare moment when they were alone, grabbing champagne from a passing waiter. "Half the room is already in love with you. And the other half? Jealous that I found you first." Sloane took a sip of champagne to cover the fact that her cheeks had gone warm. "You're good at this." "At what?" "The fake husband thing. The touches, the looks, the way you introduce me like you're actually proud to be married to me." "Who says I'm not?" He said it lightly, but there was something in his eyes that made Sloane's heart do a weird skip. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "Jasper Westfield, married. I genuinely thought I'd see a unicorn before I'd see this." The man approaching them was tall, black, with an expensive suit and a smile that managed to be both charming and slightly predatory. He looked like someone who closed business deals before breakfast and enjoyed every minute of it. "Trevor," Jasper said, and Sloane caught the slight tension in his voice. "I didn't know you'd be here. Wouldn't miss it. The gala? Boring. The chance to meet the woman who finally locked you down?" Trevor turned his full attention to Sloane. "That's worth flying in from New York for. Trevor Nash, venture capitalist, occasional pain in Jasper's side, and his best friend from college. Sloane Kincaid," she said, shaking his hand. "Current wife, occasional pain in Jasper's side, and also his wife." Trevor laughed. "I like her. She's quick." He turned back to Jasper. "So when's the real story? Because I know you, and you don't do spontaneous courthouse weddings." Sloane felt Jasper tense beside her. This was different from the polite society questions. This was someone who actually knew him. "The real story," Sloane said, stepping in smoothly, "is that we didn't want a circus. Have you seen what weddings are like these days? 300 people you barely know, a cake that costs more than a car, and 12 hours of photos where everyone tells you to look natural while posing in unnatural positions. So you opted for City Hall, 15 minutes, done. Sloane smiled at Jasper with what she hoped looked like genuine affection. Plus, he hates being the center of attention. Would you really want to sit through a ceremony where the groom looked like he was being audited by the IRS? Trevor cracked up. Okay, that's fair. He does have resting audit face. I'm standing right here, Jasper said. We know, Sloane and Trevor said in unison. Trevor studied them both for a moment, and Sloane had the uncomfortable feeling of being seen through, like he was calculating something, measuring the distance between them, looking for cracks in the facade. You know what? He said finally. I believe it. Jasper needs someone who can match his energy, someone who won't put up with his control freak tendencies. He raised his champagne glass. Congratulations, genuinely. Thank you, Jasper said, and Sloane caught something like relief in his voice. Trevor excused himself to go charm some donors, leaving them alone again. That was close, Sloane murmured. That was impressive. The audit joke was perfect. I wasn't joking. This time Jasper actually smiled. A real one, that reached his eyes and made him look about 5 years younger. They were in the middle of their third conversation with another donor couple, when a woman's voice cut through the noise. Jasper Westfield. Sloane turned and saw a blonde woman approaching in a dress that was more strategic cutouts than actual fabric. She was beautiful in that sharp, intimidating way that made regular people feel underdressed, even when wearing $15,000 gowns. Melissa, Jasper said, his voice carefully neutral. I heard rumors you'd gotten married, but I didn't believe them. You always said marriage was an inefficient allocation of emotional resources. Melissa's smile didn't reach her eyes. But here you are, with a wife. There was something dangerous in the way she said, wife, like it was a challenge. Melissa Hartley, Jasper said, his hand tightening slightly on Sloane's waist. This is my wife, Sloane. Sloane, this is Melissa. We used to date. 3 years, Melissa added, as if that mattered. Such a long time ago now. Though I have to say, Jasper, this is quite a surprise. You barely gave her a ring. Sloane looked down at her hand, at the engagement ring with its perfect diamond and emeralds. It was gorgeous, expensive, exactly the kind of ring a billionaire would give. But Melissa's ring, the one glittering on her own right hand, clearly moved from her left, was bigger, more ostentatious. A statement. I didn't need a bigger ring, Sloane said calmly. I already had what I wanted. Melissa's smile turned razor sharp. How sweet. And what exactly do you do, Sloane, besides marry well? There it was, the cut disguised as a question. I'm a graphic designer. Freelance. Sloane smiled pleasantly. I create visual identities for businesses. It's actually fascinating work. You take abstract concepts and turn them into something people can see and understand. How creative. Melissa took a sip of champagne. I run my own investment firm, Hartley Capital. Perhaps you've heard of it? Can't say that I have, but I don't really follow investment news. I'm more interested in design, art, things that require imagination rather than just money. Jasper made a sound that might have been a cough or a strangled laugh. Melissa's eyes narrowed. Jasper always did prefer simpler things, less complicated. And yet he dated you for 3 years, Sloane said sweetly. So maybe his taste has evolved. The temperature around them dropped about 15 degrees. Several nearby conversations went quiet. Melissa's smile was pure ice now. Well, I can see why you two are perfect together. Both so direct. It's one of my better qualities, Jasper said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of steel. If you'll excuse us, Melissa, I promised Sloane a dance. He guided Sloane toward the dance floor before Melissa could respond, his hand never leaving her waist. That was my ex-girlfriend, he said as they reached the center of the floor. I figured. The whole 3 years thing was a clue. She's not usually that hostile. She's jealous. Of what? Sloane looked up at him as he pulled her into a formal dance position. Of the fact that you moved on. That you found someone who makes you smile, even if it's all fake. The music started. Something slow and elegant. Jasper led her through the steps with the same controlled grace he did everything else. Sloane had taken exactly 3 ballroom dancing classes in college and remembered approximately none of it, but somehow he made it easy. Just follow his lead. Trust that he wouldn't let her fall. You defended yourself well, Jasper said quietly. The investment firm comment was particularly sharp. She insulted my career. I'm allowed to insult back. I'm not criticizing. I'm impressed. His hand on her waist pulled her slightly closer. Most people are terrified of Melissa. She's known for destroying competitors in boardrooms. I design logos. I'm not her competitor. No, you're something more threatening. What's that? Someone I chose over her. The words hung between them, and Sloane forgot how to breathe for a second. Because even though this was fake, even though they barely knew each other, the way he was looking at her right now felt very, very real. Jasper, I know. It's not real. This is all pretend. His voice was low, meant only for her. But for the record, if I were actually looking for someone to marry, you'd be exactly the kind of person I'd want. Sharp, funny, brave enough to call me an expensive fungus to my grandmother's face. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, and it includes the word fungus. He laughed, actually laughed, and several people turned to stare because apparently Jasper Westfield laughing at a gala was newsworthy. They danced through 2 more songs, and Sloane let herself pretend it was real, that she was actually married to this complicated, guarded man who made bad jokes and had a secret collection of dog-eared books. That the ring on her finger meant something beyond a business transaction. That when he looked at her like he was looking at her right now, like she was the only person in the room, it wasn't just for show. We should probably mingle more, Jasper said eventually, though he made no move to let her go. Probably. People are starting to talk about how we've danced 3 songs in a row. Let them talk. His eyes searched hers. You're dangerous, Sloane Kincaid. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. They stayed on the dance floor for 1 more song before Trevor rescued them with champagne and commentary about the terrible auction items. The rest of the evening blurred together. More introductions, more champagne, more people commenting on how perfect they were together. Sloane's feet hurt from the heels, her face hurt from smiling, and her brain hurt from keeping track of all the lies. But every time she thought about asking to leave, Jasper would catch her eye across the room and give her that almost smile, and she'd find the energy to keep going. They finally left around 11, stepping out into the cool Austin night. The valet brought the car around and they both collapsed into the back seat like soldiers after battle. That was exhausting, Sloane said, slipping off her heels with a groan of relief. That was 3 hours. I've sat through board meetings that felt shorter. How do you do this regularly? I don't. I usually send donations and skip the actual event. He loosened his bow tie, and Sloane tried not to notice how attractive that simple gesture was. But tonight was worth it. Because you gotta show off your fake wife? Because I gotta watch you verbally destroy my ex-girlfriend in front of 24 witnesses. He turned to look at her, eyes bright with amusement. The things that require imagination rather than just money line? Brilliant. She started it. She absolutely did. And you finished it. He paused. Thank you. For tonight. For playing the part so well that even my best friend believed it. It's getting easier to play, Sloane admitted. The part, I mean, being your wife. Is it? Yeah, which is probably dangerous considering this all ends in 2.5 weeks. The car went quiet. Outside, Austin streamed past in blurs of light and shadow. Probably, Jasper agreed softly. They didn't talk for the rest of the drive home. But when they got to the penthouse and Sloane headed toward the bedroom to change, Jasper caught her hand. Sloane, yeah? Tonight when we were dancing, that wasn't entirely for show. Her heart did that weird skip again. Jasper, I know. We have an arrangement, a business deal, but I wanted you to know that part was real. He let go of her hand. Good night. He disappeared into his office before she could respond, leaving Sloane standing in the hallway, wearing a $15,000 dress, and feeling like her carefully constructed emotional walls were starting to crack. 2.5 weeks suddenly felt like both too much time and not nearly enough. Sloane woke up to her phone buzzing aggressively on the nightstand. She grabbed it blindly, squinting at the screen. Marcus Ramos. Hello? Her voice came out rough with sleep. Ms. Kincaid, I found him. She sat up so fast the room spun. What? The man who drugged you. His name is Dylan Porter. 29 years old, arrested twice before for similar incidents in Dallas and Houston, never convicted because the victims couldn't identify him. Marcus's voice was steady, professional, but Mockingbird's security footage caught him clearly. He used a credit card at the bar. We have everything we need. Sloane's hand was shaking. Did you? Austin PD picked him up an hour ago. He's in custody. He won't be able to hurt you or anyone else. Relief crashed over her so hard she couldn't breathe for a second. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Mr. Westfield pays me very well. This is my job. A pause. But you're welcome. And Ms. Kincaid, you're safe now. Actually safe. Not just penthouse safe. After they hung up, Sloane sat in the massive bed, processing. The threat was gone. The reason she was here, the real reason beyond the fake marriage and the dying grandmother, was resolved, which meant she could leave. The thought should have made her happy. Instead, it felt like something heavy settling in her chest. She found Jasper on the terrace, coffee in hand, staring out at the Austin skyline. He was wearing sweatpants and an old MIT t-shirt, his hair messy, and he looked more human than she'd ever seen him. "Marcus called you too?" he asked without turning around. "Yeah, they caught him." "Good." He took a sip of coffee. "You can go home now, back to your apartment, your life. The threat's over." "I could," Sloane agreed, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "But we still have 2 weeks left on our arrangement. You don't have to stay. I can tell my grandmother we decided it wasn't working, that we moved too fast. Is that what you want?" Jasper finally looked at her, and his expression was carefully controlled. Too controlled. "What I want isn't relevant to our arrangement. Stop calling it an arrangement. That's what it is. Is it?" Sloane turned to face him fully. "Because last night you told me the dancing wasn't for show, that it was real. So which is it, Jasper? Is this a business transaction or is it something else?" He set down his coffee cup with precise, controlled movements. "Sloane, because I need to know. I need to know if the past 5 days have been just acting for you, or if somewhere in all the fake marriage and the borrowed jewelry and the lies to your grandmother, something real happened. Why does it matter?" "Because I'm starting to fall for you." The words burst out before she could stop them. "Because when you make terrible jokes and show me your secret book collection and defend me against your ex-girlfriend, I forget this is fake. And that's a problem, Jasper. Because in 2 weeks I'm supposed to walk away and go back to my regular life, where I don't live in a penthouse, and my biggest concern is difficult clients, not whether my fake husband actually likes me." The silence that followed was deafening. Jasper stared at her like she'd just announced she was moving to Mars. "You're falling for me." Apparently my brain didn't get the memo that this was all pretend. "Sloane, it's fine. I know this wasn't part of the deal. I'll still stay the 2 weeks, fulfill the contract, make your grandmother happy. But I needed you to know that for me at least, it stopped being fake somewhere around the fungus comment." She turned to go back inside, but Jasper caught her wrist. "Wait, Jasper, you don't have to." "I bought your building." Sloane blinked. "What?" "Your apartment building, the one that smells like curry. I bought it 3 days ago." He was still holding her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. "Through a shell corporation, so you wouldn't know. I was going to have my property management team fix everything. The plumbing, the electrical issues, the leak in 3B that the landlord keeps ignoring. Make it actually safe and livable." "Why would you do that?" "Because you mentioned loving the location but hating your landlord. And I have more money than any person reasonably needs. And because—" He stopped, jaw tight. "Because what?" "Because I couldn't stand the thought of you going back there alone, to that tiny apartment where someone might know where you live, where you wouldn't be safe." His voice dropped lower. "Because somewhere between you waking up in my bed and calling me an expensive fungus, I stopped pretending too." Sloane's heart was doing acrobatics in her chest. "You stopped pretending. Completely. Utterly. Which is a problem because I'm not good at this. At feelings and relationships and being the kind of person someone could actually love. Melissa was right about me. I do treat emotions like inefficient resource allocation. I work 18-hour days. I once calculated the exact caloric value of a romantic dinner and determined it wasn't cost-effective. Jasper. But with you, none of that matters. You make me laugh. You defend yourself against hostile ex-girlfriends. You invented an entire fake relationship story that was better than anything I could have planned. And when you told my grandmother you loved me," he pulled her closer, "I wanted it to be true. I wanted it so badly that it terrified me. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying this arrangement, this fake marriage, this whole ridiculous situation, I want it to be real." His eyes searched hers. I want you to stay. Not because of a contract or $50,000 or because you're afraid, but because you want to. Because somewhere in the past 5 days we accidentally built something that feels too real to walk away from. Sloane felt tears prick her eyes. Happy tears which were new. You bought my building. I know, it's excessive. Trevor would say it's peak Jasper. Solving emotional problems with money. It's the most ridiculous, over-the-top, completely insane romantic gesture I've ever heard of. So, that's a no? That's a, you're an idiot and I'm completely in love with you anyway. The smile that broke across Jasper's face was like sunrise. Slow, warm, transformative. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since this whole bizarre situation started, Sloane felt like she was exactly where she belonged. We're going to have to tell your grandmother the truth, she murmured against his chest. We will. Eventually. He pulled back to look at her. But maybe we tell her a version of the truth. That we did rush into things. That it was crazy and impulsive and completely insane. But that it was also real. And we're making it work. Is that what we're doing? Making it work? I'd like to try. If you're willing to put up with someone who calculates the caloric value of romantic dinners. Only if you're willing to put up with someone who lives in a 400-square-foot apartment and makes terrible fungus jokes. About that apartment. I'm not moving in here immediately, that's too fast even for us. What about gradually? You keep your apartment but you stay here sometimes? We date like normal people except we're already married? Sloane laughed. That's the most backward relationship progression I've ever heard of. Is that a yes? She kissed him instead of answering. It was easier than explaining that yes, she wanted this ridiculous backward relationship with this complicated man, who showed love by buying buildings and making terrible jokes. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Jasper rested his forehead against hers. I should probably apologize, he said. For what? For basically trapping you in a fake marriage when you were vulnerable. For using your traumatic situation to solve my own problems. For keeping me safe when no one else would. For making me laugh when I was scared. For introducing me to your grandmother and letting me be part of something real, even when it started as a lie. Sloane cupped his face in her hands. You don't need to apologize for that. Even though I bought your building without asking? Okay, maybe apologize for that. But also fix the plumbing first. Then we'll discuss boundaries. He laughed, and the sound was so genuinely happy that Sloane wanted to record it and play it back whenever he got too serious. 2 hours later, they were back at Mrs. Westfield's estate for lunch. The older woman took one look at them and smiled knowingly. So, she said, settling into her chair at the dining table, you're going to tell me the truth now? Sloane and Jasper exchanged glances. What truth? Jasper asked carefully. That you didn't actually get married 2 weeks ago. That this whole thing was some kind of arrangement to make me happy. Mrs. Westfield sipped her tea calmly. I'm 86, not senile. I knew from the moment I met Sloane that something was off. Sloane felt her stomach drop. You knew? Of course I knew. Jasper's been lying to me about being happy for 6 years. You think I can't tell when he's lying about being married? She set down her teacup. But here's the interesting part. You're not lying anymore. Whatever started as fake became real. I can see it in the way you look at each other. Jasper was very still. You're not angry? Angry? Darling boy, I'm delighted. Mrs. Westfield's eyes twinkled. When Sloane showed up that first night, I thought you'd finally hired a professional actress. But then she called you a fungus. And you smiled. Actually smiled. And I thought, well, this might be fake. But it's the most alive I've seen him in years. So you just played along? Sloane asked. I wanted to see what would happen. If you'd both realize what I saw immediately. That you're perfect for each other, arrangement or not. She stood up, moving toward them with surprising grace. Now I assume you're going to do this properly? Actually date? Maybe eventually have a real wedding instead of that courthouse fiction? We're taking it slow, Jasper said. Slow, right. You bought her apartment building yesterday. Jasper's eyes widened. How did you? I have very efficient sources. And you're not as subtle as you think. Mrs. Westfield patted his cheek affectionately. Now I'm old and tired, and this has all been very entertaining, but I need my nap. You two can stay for lunch or leave or do whatever it is young people in love do. Just promise me you'll invite me to the real wedding when it happens. If it happens, Sloane corrected gently. When? Mrs. Westfield repeated firmly. I may be old, but I can still read a room. And you two are endgame if I've ever seen it. After she left, Sloane and Jasper sat in the dining room processing. Your grandmother is terrifying, Sloane said finally. She knew the entire time, and she still played along, because she wanted us to figure it out ourselves. Jasper shook his head, something like admiration in his expression. She manipulated us into a real relationship. Is that what this is? A real relationship? He reached across the table and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. The rings caught the light, still borrowed, still fake in origin, but meaning something entirely different now. I'd like it to be, he said. I know we did this backward, started with marriage and worked our way back to dating, but I don't care about the order as long as the ending is us, together, actually happy. That's very romantic for someone who calculates caloric values. You're a terrible influence on me. Good. You needed one. They left Mrs. Westfield's estate with plans to actually tell Jasper's board of directors the truth, eventually, to take things at a reasonable pace, probably not, and to maybe, possibly someday have a real wedding, definitely. But for now, they went back to the penthouse, ordered takeout from the expensive sushi place where they'd had their first date, and ate it while sitting on the terrace watching the sunset over Austin. So, Sloane said, stealing a piece of sashimi from Jasper's plate. What happens to the $50,000? I'm still paying you. Contract is a contract. I don't need it anymore. The threat's gone and I'm staying because I want to, not because of money. Then donate it, or invest it, or spend it all on art supplies and terrible coffee. He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. I don't care what you do with it as long as you stay, even though I'm going to keep making fungus jokes, especially because of that. They sat in comfortable silence, and Sloane thought about how 5 days ago she'd woken up in this penthouse with no memory and no idea how her life was about to change. How she'd agreed to a fake marriage with a stranger who turned out to be kind and funny and terrible at emotions but trying anyway. How sometimes the best things in life started with the worst circumstances and ended with something real. Hey, Jasper? Yeah? Thank you for everything. For keeping me safe, for making me laugh, for buying my building even though that's excessive, and we need to talk about boundaries. You're welcome, and we will definitely talk about boundaries. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Right after I tell you about the vacation house I'm considering buying in Colorado. Jasper, I'm joking, mostly. She elbowed him in the ribs and he laughed. And somewhere in the penthouse, Sloane's phone buzzed with a text from Claudette. Heard you two figured it out. About time. Also, you're keeping the emerald dress. Consider it a gift. The team. Sloane smiled and tucked her phone away. She'd thank them later. Right now, she had a fake husband who'd become a real boyfriend to educate about appropriate gift-giving and the importance of asking before purchasing real estate. It was going to be a project. But then again, Sloane had always liked a challenge. Epilogue. 6 months later, the courthouse wedding had been fake. The rooftop proposal had been a lie. But the small ceremony in Mrs. Westfield's garden, surrounded by Jasper's grandmother, Trevor, Claudette, Bex, Sutton, Marcus, and Sloane's parents, who flew in from Portland and absolutely loved the story of how they met, was completely, perfectly real. Sloane wore a simple white dress that she'd designed herself. Jasper wore a gray suit that his grandmother had picked out. And when they said their vows, the real ones, not the fake ones from 6 months ago, neither of them could stop smiling. I promise to make terrible fungus jokes for the rest of our lives, Sloane said. I promise to laugh at them even when they're not funny, Jasper replied. I promise not to buy any more buildings without asking first. I promise to only be slightly controlling about wedding planning and home renovation. I promise to love you even when you calculate the caloric value of romantic dinners. I promise to love you even when you leave paint-stained jeans on the bathroom floor. Mrs. Westfield was crying. Trevor was recording everything on his phone. Sloane's mother kept whispering, "This is better than a movie," to anyone who would listen. And when Jasper kissed his wife, his real wife this time, Sloane thought about how 5 days had changed everything, how a terrible situation had led to the best thing in her life, how sometimes you had to start with a lie to find the truth. Mrs. Westfield, Jasper murmured against her lips. Again, Mr. Westfield, she replied, grinning. For real this time. For real, he agreed. And it was. The end.